The wind rattled the windows of Ethan Cole's small, weathered duplex on Birchwood Lane. Each gust, groaning like the house itself, was trying to withstand the storm. Rain pounded the roof in relentless sheets, drowning out the faint hum of the old space heater, fighting to warm the living room. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the electric bill spread out in front of him. Final notice stamped across the top in bold, unforgiving red. He rubbed his temples, trying to calculate which bill he could postpone this month without the whole fragile balance of his life toppling over. It was nearly 10 p.m. The world outside was dark, wet, and howling. No one should have been out there, which is why the sudden knock at the door made his head snap up. It wasn't a timid knock. It was urgent, desperate. Ethan hesitated. In this neighborhood, unexpected visitors rarely brought good news. He'd learned that the hard way over the last 4 years. Slowly, he got up, crossing the creaky floor toward the door. His hand hovered over the handle, but caution made him glance through the peephole first. 2 figures stood on the porch, drenched to the bone. Young women, maybe in their early 20s, their blonde hair plastered to their heads, clothes clinging to their shivering frames. One had her arm wrapped protectively around the other, shielding her from the wind as best she could. They didn't look dangerous. They looked lost. Ethan cracked the door open, leaving the chain in place. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice low-guarded. The taller of the two lifted her face toward him, and even in the dim porch light, Ethan saw the raw panic in her eyes. "Please, I'm so sorry to bother you. Our car broke down about a mile from here. We've been walking for hours in this storm. No one else would answer the door. We just need to use your phone to call for help." Ethan studied them in silence. They were clearly twins, identical features, the same pale skin flushed from the cold, and those eyes, wide, pleading, reminded him of Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, when she'd wake up from a nightmare and whisper, "Daddy, don't leave." The second twin's voice trembled, so hard he almost couldn't understand her. "The cell towers are down. We tried calling a tow truck earlier, but nothing's going through. We don't have money for a hotel, and it's freezing out here." Logic told him to be careful. He didn't know them. They could be lying. But another thought cut through his caution like lightning through the sky. What if it were Lily and Mason stranded out there? What if no one opened the door for them? Ethan shut the door long enough to unhook the chain. The moment he opened it again, the storm shoved its way inside, wind whipping his face, rain soaking his shirt instantly. "Come in," he said, stepping back. "Get out of this weather." The relief on their faces was so intense it nearly undid him. "Thank you," they said almost in unison, stumbling into the small living room. He grabbed 2 towels from the bathroom, worn and faded, but warm, and handed them over. "I'm Ethan," he said, clearing his throat. "I'm Claire," the taller one replied. "And this is my sister, Harper. We can't thank you enough. We were starting to think we'd have to sleep in the car." Ethan forced a faint smile. "Well, you're safe here for now." The storm pressed its palms against the windows like a living thing, smearing the glass with rivers of rain. Ethan draped the towels over the radiator and motioned toward the tiny kitchen. The phone's on the wall. Landline. Sometimes it works better than it looks. Claire lifted the receiver, dialed, waited, then frowned. "Dead," she said softly, biting the inside of her cheek. No tone, nothing. "Storm must have knocked the lines out," Ethan murmured. He opened a cabinet, fishing out 3 chip mugs that didn't match and a half-empty tin of cocoa. "Hot chocolate. It's not fancy, but it's warm." Harper's laugh was small and surprised, like she'd forgotten how. That sounded amazing. Steam rose in the cold air as Ethan stirred cocoa into milk on the stove, trying and failing not to notice the details that didn't fit. The stitching on their coats, hand done. The subtle sheen of their boots, not department store leather. A slim gold bracelet on Claire's wrist that caught the light like a secret. They were soaked through, shivering, grateful. Yet their clothes whispered a different story than their current address on Birchwood Lane could tell. He poured the drinks and slid them across the counter. "I've got blankets," he said, "and the couch pulls out into a bed." "You're very kind," Claire said, fingers wrapping around the mug like it was a fireplace. Most doors didn't even open. Harper nodded, eyes soft and serious. 17 doors. We counted. Ethan's hand paused on the drawer handle. 17. Harper's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. People peeked. They were scared. Or just busy. He swallowed something bitter that wasn't about them at all. He'd been both of those people once, scared and busy, until the divorce took busy, and the bills kept the fear. They moved to the living room, where the space heater hummed like an overworked bee. Claire sat perched on the edge of the couch. Harper tucked her legs beneath her, careful not to drip on the threadbare throw. So, Ethan said, trying to keep his tone light. Not from around here. Connecticut, Claire replied. We were. She glanced at Harper, and something passed between them, a wordless edit. Visiting a friend. Drove down to look at some places for her. Places, Ethan echoed, a brow lifting. Neighborhoods, Harper corrected quickly, then took a brave sip that burned her tongue. She didn't flinch. She's thinking about relocating. Cedar Avenue at night is a tough sell, Ethan said. Daylight helps. Noted, Claire murmured, smiling. The hot chocolate did its work, returning color to their cheeks. The storm softened a notch, as if it, too, were listening. Ethan pulled a quilt from the hall closet, soft from 1,000 washes, and the only thing in the house with a pattern bright enough to fight the gray. He made himself speak, even though silence had been his habit since the house got quiet. I'm Ethan Cole. He tried again, with more weight this time. I used to be an architect. Now I do drafting gigs. Whatever keeps the lights on. Claire's gaze sharpened, interested rather than polite. What kind of architecture? Commercial. Civic, wood and glass with a conscience. Back when clients let me have one. He shrugged. I had a small firm once, 2 partners, and a dream we paid too much rent for. What happened? Harper asked. The way she posed the question carried compassion without pity, a rare balance. Life, Ethan said, and tried to smile. A recession that came late for us. A partner who left early. A marriage that cracked along the same fault lines. He didn't say Lily's name out loud, how doing so pulled a string in his chest, but the twins waited with the patience of people who knew grief, had edges you could slice your fingers on. I've got 2 kids, he added softly. Lily's 8, Mason's 6. They live with their mom in Denver now. Claire's voice gentled. That must be hard. It is. He looked down at his cocoa, watching a ring of foam spin to the rim. I get calls, some weekends, summers if I can afford the flights. It's not the same as pancakes in the morning and science fair disasters on the kitchen table. Harper tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear. You still show up, she said, even when it hurts. Ethan huffed a laugh. I try. Showing up is most of fatherhood, far as I can tell. For a while they spoke of safer things. The way rain in this town sometimes came sideways, how the diner on Pine had pie that tasted like nostalgia, which radio stations still played songs you could sing to. The conversation walked itself toward warmth, and Ethan relaxed enough to notice that both women listened like practice, not waiting to talk, not filling silence, just making space. On the coffee table, a stack of mail leaned, final notices and polite threats in polite fonts. Ethan thumbed them into a neat pile with a reflex he couldn't break. Claire noticed, her attention flicking there and back, and for a moment Ethan saw and heard the tilt of someone used to making decisions that mattered. Phone lines might be out till morning, he said, more apology than information. You can crash here tonight. I'll pull the sofa out. We don't want to impose, Claire said automatically. You're not, Ethan replied, hearing how much he meant it. Besides, the breakfast menu is legendary, toast or toast. Harper grinned. We'll take the chef special. He set to work, muscle memory unfolding the sofa bed. Sheets fitted tight, with hospital corners. He'd learned when Lily liked to kick every blanket to the floor. He smoothed the quilt, added a second pillow, then paused in the doorway between kitchen and living room, unsure if offering more would read as kindness or crowding. "Do you need anything else?" he asked. "Dry clothes, maybe?" "I don't exactly have." He gestured at his own wiry frame and their taller silhouettes. "The right sizes." Claire shook her head. "We'll be fine. Truly." She hesitated. "Thank you for opening the door." The words landed deeper than they should have, because he'd almost not. He remembered the second where he'd stood at the peephole, calculations running like airport departures. Risk, benefit, potential delays to the rest of his crumbling itinerary. And then he'd thought of Lily's small hand, Mason's dinosaur pajamas, the way fear could be a closed door if you let it. He killed the living room lamp and let the storm be the night light. From his bedroom, down the short hall, he could hear the sisters whispering, a rustle of comfort, the murmur of a braid being undone, the soft laugh of people who had been braver than they felt. Sleep came fitful and fast, then broke like a wave on a half-remembered shore. He dreamt of blueprints turned to kites, of his children's laughter echoing down Birchwood Lane, of rain carrying away what didn't serve and returning what did. When he woke near dawn, the house was hushed, the kind that means a storm has wrung itself out. He padded to the kitchen. Claire and Harper were already awake at the small table, speaking in low tones that stopped when he appeared. He pretended not to notice the abrupt quiet and reached for the coffee tin, which was optimistically light. "I can do toast," he offered, with a dramatic flourish. Harper's mouth quirked. "We'll applaud." While the toaster ticked like a clock with stage fright, Claire set their mugs in the sink and rolled up her sleeves to wash them. The bracelet slid down her arm, elegantly simple, heavy enough to be old money disguised as modest taste. She caught him noticing and didn't hide it, just met his gaze with a small, enigmatic smile. They ate at the table like old friends who could afford to be silent. After, Ethan grabbed his keys. "Let's see that car. If it's the belt, I can at least confirm it." Outside, the street wore the storm's aftermath. Branches littered like punctuation, gutters overflowing with leaf tea. The twin sedan, sleek, midnight blue, Connecticut plates, looked distinctly out of place next to Ethan's faithful, rattling pickup. Cedar Avenue had coughed their car onto the curb like an apology. Ethan popped the hood, felt the engine story beneath his palms, and found the words he expected. A snapped alternator belt. A short-term problem with long-term implications if ignored. "Belt's gone," he said. "Tow truck to a decent shop will do it. Not the worst. Not fun, but not a tragedy." Claire's relief exhaled into the morning air. "We can call now." "My cell should have service," Ethan said, handing it over. "Reception out here is like weather, more mood than science." While she called, Harper leaned on the fender and considered him. "You said you used to design buildings with a conscience. What does that mean?" He shrugged, wiping his hands on a rag. "Places that remember they hold people. Daycare near the lobby, so a single dad doesn't have to choose between a job and a pickup. Sunlight where loneliness would otherwise breed. Ramps and railings that assume all bodies deserve beautiful entrances." Harper's eyes softened. "That sounds like the world I want to live in." The tow truck arrived with the bawl of a dying bullhorn. The driver was all business and belly, and soon enough the sedan was winched onto the bed, strapped down like a promise. Claire signed the slip with a pen that clicked like a precise thought. Before climbing into the truck's cab, she turned back and pressed a small card into Ethan's palm. It was heavier than it looked, thick stock, embossed letters that your finger could read even if your eyes were closed. "If you ever need anything," she said, and she seemed to mean the words the way a vow means itself. "Anything at all, please call." Harper echoed the sentiment with a grateful nod. "Thank you for last night. We won't forget." "Safe travels," Ethan said. He watched the truck pull away until the morning swallowed it, leaving behind the smell of diesel and the soft tremor of something in his life that had shifted one notch toward possible. Back inside, he stuck the card in the bowl by the door where Pocket Lint went to retire. He didn't look at the name. He didn't want to populate Hope with specifics. He had a blueprint to draft for a small remodeling job on Pine. There were hours to bill, a meter always running. But as he sat at his scarred table and sharpened his pencil, the house felt less empty. The storm had wrung itself out. The windows were clean with accidental courage, and on Birchwood Lane the day began like a door unlocking from the inside. 3 days passed. The storm was gone, but Ethan could still hear its echo in the quiet moments. A phantom knock at the door, the sound of Claire's laugh blending with the low hum of the space heater. He didn't know why he kept thinking about them. Maybe because in a single night, they'd turned his house from an empty box into something warm, something almost alive again. He had work, a set of floor plans for a downtown coffee shop renovation, but his mind wandered. The small card Claire had given him sat in the bowl by the door untouched. He hadn't read the name, not really. Something in him didn't want to define that night with labels, but he remembered everything else. The way Harper listened without interrupting. The way Claire's gaze was steady but softened whenever he mentioned Lily and Mason. How both of them, for reasons he couldn't name, had made him feel less like a man drowning and more like one treading water toward shore. That Friday, as the afternoon light faded, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Cole. The voice was warm, professional. Claire, we just wanted to check in, see how you were doing. Ethan smiled despite himself. I'm fine. And you? Carl fixed. Better than fixed. Harper chimed in from somewhere near the phone. Turns out we had the right people in the right place. The shop treated us well. Probably because of you. He laughed, shaking his head. I didn't do much. You opened the door, Claire said simply. Sometimes that's more than enough. They spoke a while longer. About the weather. About how Harper had found a bakery that made croissants so good it was basically an apology for every bad pastry ever eaten. Claire asked how his drafting job was going. Ethan admitted it was slow but steady. Before they hung up, Claire said, We're still in town for a bit. Would you let us buy you coffee? Just to thank you properly. Ethan hesitated. You don't have to. It's not about having to, Harper interrupted gently. It's about wanting to. He agreed. They met the next afternoon at a small cafe near the river, not the kind Ethan usually went to. This place had exposed brick, war medicine bulbs, and the kind of music that made you feel like you should linger. Claire and Harper arrived together, both dressed casually this time. Jeans, sweaters, hair down and loose. Still, even stripped of the storm and their high-end coats, there was something about them, an elegance that wasn't taught, but inherited. They talked for hours. Ethan found himself telling stories he hadn't told in years, about the first house he designed, about Lily's obsession with building Lego skyscrapers, about Mason's habit of falling asleep with a book on his face. The twins shared bits and pieces of their own past, though carefully. They'd grown up in Connecticut, traveled often, had a complicated family business. They never mentioned exactly what that business was, and Ethan didn't press. But every so often, he'd catch one of them studying him with an expression that was hard to read, part admiration, part calculation, as if they were filing away details for some purpose he couldn't see yet. When they said goodbye, Harper handed him a small paper bag. For your kids, she said. Inside were 2 stuffed animals, a fox and a bear, soft and clearly well-made. Just in case you see them soon. Ethan swallowed hard. Thank you. That night, sitting at his kitchen table, Ethan turned the card over in his hands for the first time. Heavy stock, clean design, embossed in gold, Sterling and Company, Development Group. He didn't recognize the name, but it sounded big. Bigger than him, anyway. He set it down and stared at it for a long time, feeling a quiet shift in the air, like a blueprint beginning to take shape before a single line was drawn. It was Tuesday morning, the kind that starts quiet but somehow feels like it's holding its breath. Ethan sat at his drafting table, pencil tracing clean lines for a small community center project. He liked this one. It was the kind of building that would actually help people. The doorbell rang. It was too early for mail, too late for deliveries. Probably Mrs. Jensen from next door asking for help with her gutters again. Ethan wiped his hands on his jeans and opened the door. The sight stopped him cold. On his porch stood a man in a dark tailored suit, the kind that looked like it came with its own security detail. Beside him, Claire and Harper, both smiling but with an energy in their eyes that was different. "Mr. Cole," the man asked, extending his hand. "Jonathan Sterling. I believe you've met my daughters." The name hit like a dropped stone. Sterling and Company. The card. The careful silences. The expensive coats in the middle of Birchwood Lane. "You're their father," Ethan said, shaking his hand. "Yes," Jonathan replied, warmth in his tone but an undeniable authority in his posture. "And I understand you helped them on a night when no one else would. I wanted to thank you personally." Claire stepped forward. "We told him everything, Ethan. How you opened your door. How you didn't ask for anything in return." Harper nodded. "We also told him about your work. And your kids." Ethan's stomach tightened. "You told him." "Only because we wanted him to know who you really are," Claire said quickly. "Not just what you do. Who you are." Jonathan's smile was steady, deliberate. "Mr. Cole, my daughters are good judges of character. When they insisted I learn more about you, I did my homework." Ethan's throat went dry. "Homework. I reviewed your portfolio," Jonathan continued. "What I could find, anyway. It's impressive. And I think there's an opportunity here. One that could benefit both of us." Jonathan stepped past the threshold when Ethan gestured him inside. The suit didn't wrinkle. The man carried himself like he'd never been caught in a storm a day in his life. Claire and Harper followed, their eyes flicking over the familiar living room with an almost fond recognition. Jonathan glanced at the drafting table, the carefully measured lines, the eraser shavings gathered like snowfall. "You still work by hand," he noted. "Some things feel truer that way," Ethan replied cautiously. Jonathan nodded, as if that answer pleased him. "I run Sterling and Company, development group. We design and build commercial and residential projects across the country. I've been searching for architects who understand that buildings aren't just steel and glass. They're spaces that shape lives." Ethan's heart ticked faster. "And you think, I'm one of those?" "I know you are," Jonathan said. "Not just because of your designs, but because of your character. My daughters didn't just tell me you let them in that night. They told me you listened. You gave them shelter without hesitation, even when you had little to spare." Ethan shook his head. That's just being decent." Jonathan's gaze sharpened. "Decency is rare enough to be an asset. I want you on my team. Senior project architect. Salary more than enough to let you relocate to Denver, if you wish, to be closer to your children." Ethan blinked. This is a lot." Claire stepped closer. "We didn't tell you before, but that night wasn't entirely random. We were in your neighborhood because Dad was looking at properties nearby. The storm and the car trouble kept us there. We knocked on 17 doors before yours." 17, Harper repeated quietly. "You were the only one who opened." Jonathan reached into his briefcase and placed a folder on the table. Inside were employment terms, benefits, and something that made Ethan's breath catch, a scholarship program for employees' children. Lily and Mason's names already penciled in the eligibility column. Ethan stared at the papers, the weight of possibility pressing against his chest. "Why me?" he whispered. Claire answered softly. "Because when it mattered most, you chose kindness, and that choice changes everything." Ethan stared at the folder like it might vanish if he blinked too long. His mind raced in two directions at once, the cautious voice cataloging every too-good-to-be-true story he'd ever heard, and the quieter, stubborn part of him that recognized a lifeline when it was thrown. Jonathan's voice was calm, but carried the kind of certainty that could steady a bridge. "This isn't charity, Mr. Cole. It's business, and a chance to put your skills where they matter most. But more than that, it's a chance to be where you need to be for your family." The words "your family" landed with a weight Ethan hadn't felt in years. He imagined Lily's hair smelling faintly of apple shampoo as she leaned into him, Mason's proud grin as he showed off a wobbly Lego tower. He imagined tucking them into bed without a phone connection between them. His throat tightened. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Harper said, her smile small but certain. "We've already decided you belong with us." Claire nodded. "And when we decide something, resistance is futile," Harper finished, grinning. It broke the tension enough for Ethan to laugh, rusty, but real. He reached for the pen Jonathan had placed on the folder, the weight of it solid in his hand. Signing his name felt like stepping through a doorway he hadn't known was there until now. When it was done, Jonathan extended his hand again. "Welcome to Sterling and Company." Ethan shook it, feeling a current of both relief and disbelief. "I can't promise I won't mess up sometimes." Jonathan's smile deepened. "Then you'll fit right in. We don't build perfection here, Ethan. We build what lasts." The rest of the morning blurred into a surreal haze. Details about relocation, introductions to the Denver team, talk of housing assistance. Claire and Harper stayed through it all, answering his questions, already speaking of him as though he were family. When they finally left, Ethan stood at the doorway, folder clutched to his chest. The street outside was quiet, washed clean by last week's storm. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about how to survive the month. He was thinking about how to live the next decade. 6 months later, Denver's skyline stretched beyond Ethan's new office window, sunlight catching on glass towers, mountains rising in the distance like watchful giants. From here, the city felt both vast and personal, a place big enough to dream in but close enough to touch. On his desk sat a framed photo. Lily and Mason in matching flannel pajamas, frosting cupcakes in his new kitchen. Their smiles were so wide, so present. It almost hurt to look at them. The custody agreement had been finalized 2 months ago. Joint custody. Half the week with him, half with their mother. The first night they'd slept in his home, Ethan had read Goodnight Moon aloud, his voice catching on the last page, and Lily had whispered, "You don't sound like the phone anymore." At Sterling and Company, Ethan had become the lead architect on a community center project, a place designed for single parents, after-school programs, and small businesses to share space. It was exactly the kind of work he'd dreamed of doing before life had unraveled. Jonathan stopped by his office most mornings, never hovering, always offering the kind of mentorship that felt more like partnership. Claire and Harper had become constants. Harper bringing him strong coffee before early site meetings, Claire looping him into design discussions where his ideas were heard, not just tolerated. One Friday evening, as they packed up, Harper leaned in the doorway. "Family dinner Sunday. Dad's making his lasagna." Ethan smiled, shutting his laptop. Wouldn't miss it. That weekend, over lasagna and laughter in the Sterling's kitchen, Ethan realized something. The night of the storm hadn't just given him a job or a new city. It had given him a place where his kindness had value, where his skills mattered, where his children could see him not just as their dad, but as a man who kept fighting for better. And as Harper passed him a slice of garlic bread and Claire refilled his glass, he thought, sometimes you open the door for strangers and end up letting your own future in. It was a rainy Thursday evening in Denver, the kind of steady drizzle that painted the streets in silver. Ethan had just finished a late meeting at the community center construction site. The place was coming alive, steel beams reaching upward, walls beginning to frame what would soon be classrooms, studios, and open spaces where people could build their own futures. Driving home, he passed Lily's school and noticed the lights still on in the gym. Curiosity pulled him inside. A small group of parents was gathered, watching their kids rehearse for the spring play. Lily spotted him instantly. "Dad," she called, running across the floor to hug him. Mason followed, his little hands gripping a paper crown that had seen better days. Ethan knelt to their height. "You two are the best part of my day." And he meant it, every single word. That night, after tucking them in, he sat on the couch with a cup of tea, the sound of rain soft against the windows. His mind drifted back to that stormy night on Birchwood Lane, the knock on the door, the faces on his porch, the decision he could so easily have made differently. 17 doors had stayed shut. His had opened, and that one act, small, almost ordinary, had changed everything. He reached for his phone and typed a short message to Jonathan. "Thank you for trusting me with more than a job. You gave me my life back." The reply came quickly. You gave it to yourself. We just made sure you had the tools. Ethan smiled, setting the phone down. Outside, the rain kept falling, gentle and steady. Not a storm this time, just a reminder that life comes in seasons. Some washed things away. Others helped them grow. He thought about what he would tell his kids when they were older, about that night. How kindness costs nothing but changes everything. How sometimes the smallest yes can open the widest doors. And as he closed his eyes, hearing Lily's soft breathing from down the hall and Mason's occasional sleepy mumble, Ethan understood that he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living.